Lloyd Vance's Insider Football is back for another week here on 1029 The Game and a Coast Sports Digital Network. So glad everybody could be with us this evening. As I always say, the NFL never sleeps, and there's always something to talk about. I know everybody's getting ready for baseball to start and, NBA playoffs, but it's football all the time here on Lloyd Vance's Inside Football. And joined this week by my number one pinch hitter. He's got his Phillies hat on. Now, I'm old school, Greg Gross, Del Unser. He's probably like, who are these guys? But they were great pinch hitters, and I'm glad to have Javon Alford on this evening. He's a great pinch hitter coming on the show as Kevin Midgette is on assignment. How you doing, Javon? I think Javon is having technical difficulties. Angel, you can hear me, right? Thumbs up. All right, so Javon, is something on your end, maybe reboot, and I can just keep it going.
Yep, I can hear you.
Oh, we got him. There we go. We know how it is. Angel and I roll with the punches here, and we're used to maybe Kevin's computer. We're not going to go into all that, but we're glad Javon's with us this evening. How you doing, Javon?
I'm doing good, man. Glad to be back on with you. And like you said, the NFL never sleeps. There's always something happening, something going on with the NFL. No off season, literally.
No all season, and it's exciting times around the NFL. And got some good news from Angel. He's going to be working with the UFL, and that spring league is getting ready. Angel, has it kicked off yet? I'm not. All right. All right. So this Friday, tune into the UFL in Orlando. Angel is going to be doing some work with him. And Javon, what do you think in terms of spring football? Do you think I was a big fan growing up when I was a kid of USFL and that whole experience, and I thought if they had stayed with the springtime, and I talked with some other people that are involved in NFL Europe, if they had kept it in the United States, do you think spring football can succeed, and where do you see it going?
I definitely think it can succeed. I've been, following it, for the last few years when they brought the UFL back. I think that was like 22. I think when it was the UFL, XFL, and then eventually they merged last year. I think, yeah, they merged last year. That was UFL the first year. So this is second season of the UFL. I definitely think that spring football has a place and a purpose. Just because it gives guys opportunity, it gives them a second chance to get that film, those game reps that you necessarily can't get, in a practice squad, right? Like we see a lot of guys who played in the league that necessarily didn't get the chance or they fumbled their chance and things just didn't break even. But now this is their opportunity to get back, right? You have a guy like Dorian Thompson Robinson who's with the
Yeah.
Orlando Storm. He's going to get, this second chance to prove himself. And I was always thought when he got cut by the Eagles, I thought, the UFL is the perfect landing spot for him because he's a guy that second string, third string quarterback. He's not getting as many live game reps. All he's getting is those in the preseason, right? So now we're going to see him get hopefully a full season of work in Orlando, and hopefully that helps him. And I think spring leagues also help create stories of guys that we don't know about, right? I think from a kicker perspective, right? Brandon Aubrey and
How
and
about
Jake
that? Yeah.
Bates, two guys that were playing spring football, become household names because of look how far they can kick the football, right? Brandon Aubrey's the best kicker in the league and maybe getting paid to be that. And then Jake Bates, he's done well. We saw this past season the Rams with Harrison Mevis, who was with Birmingham last year. Like he's doing well. And Cavante Turpin, another USFL guy, with the New Jersey Generals. Like you talk about he wasn't just in the USFL. I remember he was a special teams guy, but offensively, you get the ball in his hands and you just let him go. And I think we're starting to see that in the NFL now with him. Like first, he was just a guy on special teams, but the Cowboys have started to work him in more offensively. So I think it's good, like I said, for guys that are trying to get back into the NFL, need those reps, and for those stories that we don't hear. And I think the momentum has to just continue. I think they have the right guy in charge in Mike Rapoli. He's a little bit brash of a guy. Just you could tell he's very confident in what he believes in and what he's trying to do from a business standpoint. And you might not, it might rub people the wrong way, but you got to give them credit because it's got people's attention, right? You know, the drastic changes they made, not having the tush push, which I thought was just hilarious, but it got people talking, right? Like, tush push doesn't happen in spring football, but it got people talking. So I think spring football, I think it's here to stay. I think it just needs to continue to get stability, and I hope that this year it gets that stability because it seems like the momentum is in the right place, and hopefully they can continue to grow to get two more teams here, two more teams there, and build on sometimes markets that don't have pro football, right? Orlando, I think, is great. Let's see if they can get it together. You know, after having the Guardians a couple years back, St. Louis has thrived with, you know, spring football back and showing that fan base. So I think spring football is a good opportunity and it's a good place, and I think that as long as people watch and also show up in those markets, I think that we'll be in a great spot for it.
Yeah, Javon, I agree. You know, and the thing is, I think this group that's running the UFL understands their niche. You know,
Hmm.
before you had a lot of guys in the USFL in the past. You know, one of them's president now. You know, and he was running New Jersey Generals, and he decided to take the NFL head to head. But you don't want to do that. You know, you want to build something where it can be minor league. You know, in
Yeah.
terms of National Football League, and the best thing it could be is a feeder. You know, if they
Hmm.
get on board where you have a relationship between some of these pro teams in a certain region and a UFL team. They can send their guys there to develop, kind of like what you're talking about. You know, DTR is a guy I immediately thought about because I did watch him a lot with the Eagles in terms of preseason. And then when he was with Cleveland, you know, you could see him in those games and even at UCLA making plays, but he needs
Hmm.
reps. So
Yeah.
I think it's a good opportunity for him. And you've seen there's Hall of Famers from the USFL old days, you know, Reggie
Hmm.
White, Sam Mills, even Kurt Warner played NFL Europe and bounced around these minor league football, and he was able to come into NFL and survive and thrive.
Yeah, because football, at the end of the day, football is football. It doesn't matter where you play it. Like you mentioned, Kurt Warner, NFL Europe, arena football. Like we're talking smaller field, ball has to get out your hands. Like if you can
Right.
play, the people, you know, the people will find you. And I think NFL teams are starting to notice that, right? The Cowboys noticed it because they got Brandon Aubrey and Cavante Turpin. The Lions, I think, have realized that too, you know, not only with Jake Bates, but getting Jacob Sailors last summer as a guy that was a great running back last couple years with St. Louis Battlehawks, but they didn't need him to be their third string, fourth string running back because they were already stacked. But they found a role for him on on kick returns, and he was better kick return. He was their kick returner the entire season. So I think like what you said, like if they stay in their lane in their niche of not trying to be the NFL, but like you said, being that minor league and saying like, hey guys, like if you want to get to the next level, if you want to go to the NFL, like this is the place for you. But for some guys that might not be the case. You might go CFL or you just might max out and be a very good spring player, which is not the worst thing in the world, right? Because at the end of the day, you can say I played football maybe at not the highest level that I wanted to be, but I played football. I got everything out of the game that I needed to be, and I'm on national TV every week. So I
And
think that it's a good spot.
you're definitely correct. And there's just so many players out there, you know, so many major college, Division 1, Division 2, you
Hmm.
know, Nate's Division 3 player. There's players at all levels, NAIA, you know,
Yep.
and there's some talent out there. So I think the big thing is get the investment in terms of maybe NFL dollars. They
Yep.
seem to have a TV contract because, you know, Fox and ESPN, they want to have programming in the springtime. You know, not
Hmm.
everybody is baseball centric. They want to watch some football, you know, and people are football crazy. And Kevin and I talked about this before. The big G word comes in here, you know, they're gambling on these games. So people
Yeah.
are,
Yeah, they
are they're
are.
putting cake on it. They're going to be watching it.
Yeah, no, they definitely have they have the daily fantasy stuff out there. They have, like you said, the sports betting lines. We already have, you know, championship odds out across multiple sports books already. So it's like you said, it's percolating. And I think if people see these high scoring games, right, they see the innovation of obviously the kickoff rule. Where did the kickoff rule come from? Came from spring football, right? Now you're seeing the innovation of you know, their fourth down rule. The fourth down rule, I think, is 4 for 12 or 4 for 15 or
Yeah.
something like that. And no punting now. I think there's a new rule. There's no punting once you get to like the 50-yard line. So they're trying to make the game exciting, for the fans that obviously go to the games, but for the fans that do, like you said, that watch the games, because this is great. If the games are good, then that's great for these television partners, like you said. Like if you're ABC and I can snag, a weekend for a 3 hour block, and somehow our game ends up, close with 2 minutes to go, and there's a game winning touchdown, like that clip is going to be shared across social media, and you hope that those eyes come back to you the following week.
Correct. And it's good, Javon and I are talking about this, and you're here on Lloyd Vance Insider Football on 1029 The Game Coast Sports Digital Network. Thanks for joining us. Javon made a good term early a couple minutes ago, and I think it applies now. One of the biggest stories this week, and I don't know if you watched it. I watched some of it. Team USA flag football team. They're going to be going to LA games in 2028. They dominated some NFL players, former NFL players, some YouTube influencers. It was kind of odd how they put the teams together in flag football. Even Tom Brady was out there, 48 years old. He was slinging a rock, and he had Odell Beckham out there. Unfortunately, Gronk pulled his hamstring. He's probably, dehydrated from all the beers and partying. But what do you think in terms of flag football? I watched a lot of, NFL type shows today, and some people were like, well, they didn't really care, and those other guys are tryhards and all that. What do you think in terms of flag football? I think the big thing is it's just different, 5-on-5, it's faster, and those guys aren't used to pulling flags.
Yeah, no, they aren't. I think that's the biggest adjustment. I think for those guys, some of them are used to hitting guys. You had some guys playing off defense that don't play defense. Like Stephon Diggs was on offense. Like that's not his mo. Watching the flag game almost reminds me of indoor football compared to NFL football, because indoor football is fast paced, 50 yards inside the walls, like type situation. In flag, as we saw, it's a very smaller field. Guys are coming at you. They're not hitting you, but they're running at you to get that flag. And I think we kind of saw the skill the skill that it takes to play flag is different than it is to play tackle. The way get the ball out, the way the guys are moving, the way that the one guy, I think, what made the catch, but then somehow was like almost like gliding on his knees and almost scored, and he didn't get his flag pulled. Like that's take a level of skill that you can't do in the NFL. So I think the result was expected. I think if you gave these NFL players maybe another crash course in it, I think they probably could pick it up. But it was a good show of showing like, hey guys, like Team USA isn't no slouch. Like these guys actually, you can tell they're not tryhards. They just do this for real. Like they play this game. Like, and somebody that played, I've played flag football before in a adult league. Like it's a different level. Like you can't think tackle. It's you got to think catch the ball, try to grab my flag, and not pulling the flag. And pulling the flag is actually the hardest thing to do because you actually have to pull it. You just can't, just tug it. You
Right.
got to pull it.
Yeah, and it's a different mindset, and it's also you got to practice this. I don't think
Hmm.
Tom Brady was practicing too
No.
much and getting
But he
ready
still
for
got
this.
that. He still got that arm though.
He went out there and slung a couple passes. He was like, "Whoa!" He avoided the rush. Got out. I was saying he's 48 years old. I mean, Javon, he looked pretty good. Burrow was out there, Jaden Daniels, but also I think a lot with these pro guys, they're $1 million athletes, and they don't want to be the next. You probably remember this Robert Edwards, a guy that gets hurt in a meaningless thing, and voids their contract. So they went out there,
Hmm.
they had fun, but as you said, 5-on-5, these guys know what they're doing, and I know Nate and him and his tackle buddies, they recently played in a flag tournament, and he told me the same thing. He's like, "Oh man, them guys, they knew exactly all the rules and where the out of bounds was, and there were a lot of penalties in terms of some of the NFL guys. I just don't think they knew the
Hmm.
rules, but to his credit, and you and I talked about him. I think last year was USA quarterback Darrell Housh to set the third. He was the MVP. Uh, he looks real comfortable playing quarterback for them. So I think maybe when they go to LA in 2028 for the Olympics, maybe they have a sprinkling of a couple NFL guys. I think the
Yeah.
receivers probably could pick it up easily. You can imagine having Justin Jefferson out there or some of the other
Jameer
guys. I
Gibbs
mean,
at running back. Come on.
yeah, they would just dominate. So I think if you sprinkle some of the NFL guys in there with some of the existing players, they're going to win, and it's going to be interesting to see how the world does. I don't know if Australia how they're preparing or some of these other places in terms of playing U.S. football, let alone flag football. So, but it was fun to watch, and as I said earlier, you have to tune into something at this time of the year, and get it. The big thing is obviously getting ready for the draft, and all the teams
Hmm.
are. But Javon, there were a couple other big news came down. I want to get your uh, take on. KC signs tight end Travis Kelsey, who's 36 years old. They signed him to a 3-year, $54.73 million contract, average of 18.24 per year. And he's now the third highest paid tight end. Is he going to live up to that contract? 3 years at 36 years old. I mean, he's kind of old.
Yeah, that contract screamed to me like a thank you for everything you done type of contract. Like we appreciate your service, but and we're going to send you off the right way. I just don't know how much Kelsey has in the tank. I mean, granted, speed was never his thing, right? Ever since he came, speed was never his thing. But his elusiveness, he still had some elusiveness to make plays and be a mismatch against certain linebackers. At 36 years old, I don't think he has those mismatch, skills to get open for a lot of guys. I mean, if you're Patrick Mahomes, you hope that he has, at least one more good year left in the tank because that's you saw how he's the engine for that offense. Even though they do have Kenneth Walker, he's that engine in that passing game for the other guys, the Rasheed Rices, the Xavier Worthies. Like he's still that guy. But 3 years, that's a lot of money. I would be surprised if he finishes a 3-year contract. To be honest with you, I think it depends. I think his contract will be over depending on how the Chiefs season ends.
Yeah, I think you're right that the Hunts are giving him back pay, making sure he's up there in terms of Pitts and some of the other higher paid tight ends. But
Hmm.
at this stage in his career, and you could see it late in the season, and he had kind of a lull mid-season where he was kind of struggling. He did
Yeah.
it finish with 76 catches on 108 targets, 851 yards, 5 TDs. So he did get involved in the mix, but there were times that he just looked okay. He's looking a little old, and we'll see if he's able to turn back the clock. But I tend to agree with you that they need to start looking towards the future and some of their other younger tight ends, whether it's Noah Gray or some of these other guys, in terms of getting them ready and maybe limiting his reps. Maybe have him around the goal line, kind of what like Gronk did with
Yeah.
Tom Brady when he was with Tampa. So. Um, Got to limit his blocking, in my opinion. You don't want him at its point of attack, holding that edge anymore. That's just
No, no,
not
no,
his
no.
game. Maybe get him in space. You see a lot of that, like what Washington was doing with Zach Ertz. They were getting him in space, allowing him not to take as much punishment. But yeah, it's going to be shorter routes for Travis Kelsey. So he got signed. The other big signing, and this is my guy all fantasy season, and I was like, oh, get him the ball, get him the ball. He didn't have the best Super Bowl, but Seattle receiver Jackson Smith and Jigba JSN gets a 4-year, $168.6 million extension, average of 42.2 every year. Highest paid receiver in football. He was last year's Offensive Player of the Year. As I said, Super Bowl champion with Seattle. Was this the right move? And what do you see Seattle doing from here?
I think that's what Seattle. I feel like that's what Seattle was going to do. Once they did not re-sign Kenneth Walker, it was just even though they already had an abundance of cap space, but once you kind of don't re-sign Walker, you kind of set the stage for you have to start extending guys. So why not extend JSN at this juncture? Even though I think this is only he just wrapped up his 3rd year. Why not get ahead and kind of almost like what Howie Roseman does, kind of almost set the market in a way, like getting ahead of the curve, or you'll end up in like a Cincinnati Bengals situation where you have to pay, that Jamar chases at an exorbitant amount of money to try to keep him. So I think for Seattle, it's the right move. I mean, JSN has just been He's been everything as advertised and more. I mean, it's an Ohio State wide receiver, right? Like the dude is just he's just good. It doesn't matter like the speed, the shiftiness, the route running. Like he just gets open and bona fide like wide receiver one. Like the way that he's kind of helped revolutionize that Seattle offense. I mean, has been just tremendous. Going from being that secondary option next to DK and Tyler Lockett to now being the guy, right? I think everybody was
Mhm.
wondering, okay, how will he kind of translate being the number one without having a DK by his side? Granted, he still had Cooper Cup, but Cooper Cup isn't what Cooper Cup was, 4 or 5 years ago. He still put up outstanding numbers, like, and I think the best is yet to come. I think the best thing yet has come for him, so I'm not surprised to see this a smart deal, by the Seahawks getting knocked out, and now it sets the market for the other guys, right? And now George Pickens is looking at it like, okay, now what's my price tag going to be? Not only with Alec Pierce getting paid, what we mentioned, a couple weeks ago, but now with JSN getting, a good amount of cash.
Yeah. And yeah, JSN now, he's number one at 42.2 million. Jamar Chase number two at 40.3 million per year. Uh, Justin Jefferson 35 million. Now that's not looking like such a big deal. He's
Right.
the third. You got CD Lamb at 34 million. He's in a fourth spot. DK Metcalf 33 million, and then Pickens is somewhere underneath that. He's at 28 million franchise deal. Um, is that the right order? Well, give me your top five receivers in the NFL and kind of why.
Oh, put me on the spot right there. Top five wide receivers. Oh
Is
man.
anybody missing from that? I tend to think, and I'll throw his name in there. Puka Nakua, I think he's got to be in there somewhere, and I think he'll probably break JSN's record soon.
Yeah, you gotta think Puka's gotta be in there. Cause you got Justin Jefferson. Jefferson, even though he's not, I don't think Jefferson's in that top five money wise, but you got Jefferson as number one. Like he's just all world. Number two, I feel like people go Jefferson Chase, number two. I think three. I think three. You got to go CD Lamb. I think CD is good. I don't care if he's a Dallas Cowboy. CD is good. Like you want CD Lamb on your team,
Is
outside,
he the best
inside.
on his team, though? Is he better than George Pickens?
Ooh,
Who's
that.
Quinyon Mitchell's shadowing when the Eagles play?
Ooh, that's a good question. I I think Quinion probably shadows Pickens, and
Okay.
Cooper is probably hanging with CeeDee Lamb, which didn't work out well last year at all. But I think those three guys. I think number four. I think you put JSN at that number four mix there. I think JSN at four. I think fits right in that bubble because all those four guys are interchangeable. And five. Five can go a lot of different ways. It used to be DK, but I don't see DK as like top five
Not with
anymore.
Aaron Rodgers as quarterback. We
No,
don't even
no,
know.
not
Or Mason
no,
Rudolph or
or
Will
Mason.
Howard.
No, he's not at all. Not in that range at all. Number five. Number five, you could literally go Puka, but then I can see people going maybe Devontae just based off of longevity and just, prestige. You can also go AJ at number five too, because AJ is just
Right.
athleticism and just he can get off. That's tough. I would put. I would put. I'm gonna go. I'm gonna go Nakua number five. I'm gonna go
Okay.
Nakua number five just because while he doesn't have the speed, of those guys or like the athleticism of a AJ Brown, his route running, the way he can get open, those are the things you can't teach, right? Those are the things you know, that what makes him great. Obviously, also being him physical in the running game as a blocker, like
Right.
it's almost like the complete package, just minus the speed. But it don't matter if you can get open, right? So those would be my five. But I think, like I said, AJ Pickens, like those guys are like right there too.
They are, and the receivers. I always have fun like with my son saying who's top 10 because they always like putting those lists together.
Yeah.
They like NBA basketball, because the NBA is always that. They're deciding who's the top 10 and receiver and quarterback. It always seems everybody's doing that in the National Football League, and everybody's always debating, obviously, with the
Hmm.
quarterbacks. And I know all the Jalen Hurts haters. He threw a pick six in his flag appearance yesterday, so he probably like, oh, I told you. But you got to give hurts some leeway. Some of the fans out there, take it easy on him. I mean, the guy won a Super Bowl. He's been to another, and we can debate that another time whether he's top whatever in terms of quarterbacks. But I know one thing: all those guys that are supposed to be ahead of him, most of them have never won anything. Josh
Nope.
Allen, Lamar Jackson, they have not won,
Dak
and he's
Prescott.
won a Super Bowl. And I don't know if it was you or Kevin. We were talking about it. How is Dak paid $60 million a year, the highest paid quarterback? I mean, and it's an albatross of a contract to the Cowboys.
Cause they can't find nobody else better. That's the thing. It's almost like the Kirk Cousins effect. Why does Kirk Cousins keep getting paid? Because he has these franchises hamstrung to believe no one else. I'm the best option you have. It's almost like Daniel Jones and the Colts, like we talked about a couple weeks ago. Daniel Jones could literally go to the Colts and say, "What else do you have? I'm your best option." And Dak Prescott can say that too. It's like every time I'm under center, we put up points. We put up 30 points a game. I throw for like 3,500 yards and 35 touchdowns. Like it's your defense that got a problem. Like so, that's where he gets it. But eventually, we have to start. We have to start putting pressure on them because it don't matter. You can put up pretty numbers in the regular season if you're not making the playoffs. It don't amount to
Yeah, and it
anything.
takes two to tango. You got to find an owner
Hmm.
like Jerry Jones, and I'm loose with my money. He's
Yep.
like that guy in the casino. He don't care. He's just spending all his money, and it's just as you said in terms of building a whole team, and particularly their defense. They got problems because their offense. They spending so much money on that offensive side of the football, and they don't have any playmakers on defense to stop anybody. So it's the good teams find that balance. Whether
Hmm.
it's Mahomes doesn't have to be the highest paid guy. He gets it.
Yep.
And then I talked about Tom Brady deferring a lot of his money from his glory years with the Patriots. He said, "All right, push the money out, and we'll sign other people because you can't just have a high-priced quarterback or a high-priced receiver, because it's just too much to work around." And when you look at the Bengals, Burrow played in that flag game the other day. It's tough on him because yeah, he has two great receivers. They're paying pretty high money to, in Higgins and Jamar Chase. But the other positions, particularly the offensive line, is he's getting beat up a lot, and defensively, they're not stopping anybody either.
Exactly, and I think that's where the whole like franchise quarterback myth thing. I think that's where things get so just construed and messed up. I forgot who said it. I think it was my guy Emery Hunt, where he talked about how we view quarterbacks and how we shouldn't view it in the lens of the franchise quarterback. We should. I think he said like almost like view things as like putting the best pieces around your quarterback to succeed as one of 11 guys to putting the best team around them
Right.
because you need your quarterback to have success, but your quarterback can't have success by itself. It's the pieces that are around them. I mean, we saw with Jalen Hurts. Like Jalen Hurts made two Super Bowls. Yeah, he played great both in both of them, but he had pieces around him. He had weapons around him, and I feel that's always the thing where people try to like put the narrative on Hurts of just like, oh, he's not a great quarterback. Well, it's like, can you blame his GM for doing their job? Like, you can't
Right.
because we if you're a fan of the Ravens or you're a fan of the Bengals or you're a fan of the Chargers, right? You're asking your GM to do the same thing. Like, why aren't you giving my guy this? Joe Burrow. Why aren't you giving Joe Burrow a great offensive line? Why are you giving him some ball hawks on defense? Lamar Jackson. Why are you not giving him a number one wide receiver? Why do we keep rolling out, the AARP wide receivers of DeAndre Hopkins, Des Bryant, Odell, and Deshaun Jackson? Like, those are the questions that you ask yourself as a fan, and you get irritated when you see other GMs do it so well, like how we like what the Rams do
Yeah,
with
John
Les
Schneider, Les
yeah,
Steve.
John
Yep.
Snyder,
Yep.
even what Nick Casario has done down in Houston. Like, those are the type of GMs that you want that have a plan, that have a vision, and just continue to cultivate and build on those philosophies.
Yeah, and you don't want your GM to go all in
No.
1 year and then you have 3, 4 years out in the desert. You want to have that consistent winning
Hmm.
level 5 straight years, and the draft's got to be the lifeblood of your team. You have to
Yes.
draft well,
Yes.
and that's the way the good teams build. And speaking of the draft, and this is probably not a good pick to talk about, but in 2023, this player was the number 4 overall pick. We everybody got enamored with his skills at the NFL Combine. We talked about that a couple weeks ago. The Underwear Olympics, he shined there, and it wasn't real football. But Anthony Richardson, I mean, he
Yeah.
looks the part. He's only 23. His birthday is in May. He'll be 24, but he's younger than I think like Carson Beck and some of these other guys coming out. Um, the Colts are shopping him, and they're not finding a lot of buyers. Do you think at this stage in his career somebody's going to take a flyer on him, whether it's the Steelers? I've heard the Packers maybe. You know, is there something to be salvaged here with Anthony Richardson? We know his completion percentage is 50% and only 11 touchdowns and 13 interceptions in his career, but is there a landing spot for him in the NFL?
I definitely think there's a landing spot because of, I think, number one, you mentioned it, his age and just those intangibles and qualities that he does have. That athletic quarterback that can run, that's built like Cam Newton with the rocket arm. Now it's about, can you tame the rocket arm to be, to be accurate? And I think for him, it's just going to be, can you land in that situation that does it, for you. Green Bay seems like the optimal spot for him because we just saw what they were able to do with Malik Willis the last couple years. They turned him from what, a 50 something percent completion percentage to what he ended in Green Bay at 78.7. Like completely just changed his trajectory around to where he got paid, but they were able to kind of get him on the right track. And I think if he were to land in a Green Bay, that would be the spot for him. Now, the Colts, their asking price might have to go down a little bit. Like you might have to say, you might have to be willing to take a fifth or a sixth round pick for it. And I only say that because that's the type of capital that Justin Fields has gone for in his last couple of trades, fifths and sixth round picks. And Fields had way more games under his belt in ceiling and showed a little bit more than what Anthony Richardson, has shown. So I think it is salvageable. I think it's just, can he end up in the right spot where somebody's actually going to sit and develop him and kind of not break him back down to rebuild him back up, but what can you do well and how can we put you in the positions and to kind of succeed and kind of get the ball back rolling. Like you said, I think Green Bay will be fine. I think Pittsburgh will even be fine because people forget, like, Dak Prescott's success came under Mike McCarthy. Like, and Dak was a fourth round pick. When he came out, he was a guy that had a big arm coming out of Mississippi State, and Mike McCarthy was able to, in his staff, and I think he's got a couple of those guys with him in Pittsburgh that were able to kind of put Dak in position to where Dak is where he is. So I think if you're not going to draft a quarterback in this year's draft class because it's a little bit up and down, why not consider putting that fifth or sixth round pick into a guy like Anthony Richardson and see what you get? You don't pick up his club option, and if it don't work out, you want to give him a fifth, sixth round pick. He hits free agency, and now he's a reclamation project for somebody else. But if it does work, you can still decline that option, and maybe you can work something out to 1 year, 2 years, small deal, and try to see what you can get and continue to build on that consistency that you're trying to get from him.
Yeah, and I agree. There's a spot for him in the National Football League. It may not be as a frontline starter, but he may need to go somewhere and learn for a couple of years, kind of like we're
Hmm.
seeing what Trey Lance is doing right
Yep.
now, learning. With the Chargers behind Herbert, he's obviously not going to be thrust in there right away, but he'll be ready, and he's learning in the team room, and it's just a good situation. We just saw Sam Darnold. I mean, reclamation project. He went to
Yeah.
the Niners. Rebuild himself as the Niners as their backup quarterback, and then he went to the Vikings, and obviously everybody knows what happened in Seattle winning that Super Bowl, so it can happen. But I think, yeah, DTR, as long as they can get his completion percentage up, somebody's going to take a chance with him. So,
Yeah.
I think that's an interesting development around the National Football League. Another one, Javon, you mentioned it. Justin Fields, 27. He's traded from the Jets. He went from the outhouse to the penthouse. He goes to the Kansas City Chiefs for a sixth-round pick in 2027. He's probably going to get an opportunity to start
Hmm.
as Patrick Mahomes recovers from this ACL from 2025. But I always thought he had ability. I always talk Nate's like he's trash. You know what I mean? But I just think that Fields has some ability, and much like you said, if he got harnessed the right way, I think he could play well. Don't forget, in 2024, he made 6 starts for the Steelers, 4-2 in those starts with 10 total touchdowns.
Yeah, and we saw what the Steelers did, in the Arthur Smith offense, which is not the most prettiest offenses to watch on television. They played to his strengths and they did it well. And I think that's going to be the key for him. And I think him going to KC, I feel like if you're a Chiefs fan, this is the most upside you've had at backup quarterback in like years. Like you won't have to worry about Gardner Minshew or Chris Oladokin or or none of those guys. Like I think if you're the Chiefs and if you're Fields, this is the perfect spot for you because number one, you're going to be in the same room with Patrick Mahomes. Number two, you're going to be getting teachings from Andy Reid, but also Eric Bieniemy and those guys. Like if anything, he should get better because I always feel like with Justin Fields, that quarterback we saw at Ohio State is still there. Like it's there. It's how can you make that connection, like almost like that plug to plug it in to get back to that guy and bring him to the NFL because we saw his last games at Ohio State against that playoff game against Clemson where he was just airing the ball out up and down the field and it's just like that quarterback is still there. It just haven't, manifested itself. The Jet situation was just I don't know what quarterback would have thrived in that situation. Like I don't know what quarterback would have made do there. So I think him going with Andy and, being in KC for the year, this could be his maybe this is his Sam Darnold, Baker Mayfield, reclamation, story where he gets to sit, learn from Mahomes, like you said, possibly play a couple games. Who's to say if Mahomes doesn't come back until week 3, week 4, and Fields comes in and has 3 good starts? They're going to say thank you for your service and you'll go back on the bench. But teams around the league are not going to forget that and say, hey, now, like maybe Justin Fields has figured it out again. If he has 3 good games or 2 good games, people are going to say, like, oh, he might actually have what we're looking for at a quarterback. And he's still young ish. Like, he's still young ish to a point, and he doesn't have a lot of wear and tear on him. So, if they can figure out mechanics and put him in situations, to succeed, he might be okay. This should be his chance to do something with it. But if he doesn't do anything with it, then that's going to hurt because I'm a big Justin Fields person too. I think that he has it. It's just yeah, he's got to do it here though. He can't. It's not the next team. Like it has to happen with Andy and the Chiefs.
Yeah, and Andy Reid is probably the right person to coach with him. I covered that 2010 team with Michael Vick where, you know, Vick was handed the keys to the car and he had a
Hmm.
borderline MVP type season
Yep.
and Andy Reid figured out a way to harness him, got him to buy into studying the playbook, just being a leader around the team and teaching him the position because Vic was honest. He was like, in his early years, he didn't. He was just going out there
Hmm.
doing his thing, and it was easy. But he learned to be a student in the game, and I think this could really help Justin Fields similarly because he was he's had what the second highest rushing season for a quarterback. I think he was with the Bears, so he
Hmm.
has that ability. So maybe Reed put some packages in for him, short yardage, goal line, and they're going to have fun using him once Mahomes is healthy. So, but I think this is a great landing spot for Justin Fields. And as I said earlier, the Jets, getting to the Jets, Javon, wanted to ask you this. Are the Jets and Miami Dolphins, are they tanking? Are they playing some NBA ball here, getting ready for that 2027 draft? That 2027 draft, there's so many good players coming out.
Hmm.
Arch Manning out of Texas, Trinidad Chambliss out of Ole Miss, you have Dante Moore out of Oregon. Then the receivers, we talked about them being a new glamour position around the NFL. Jeremiah Smith, Ohio State, Ryan Williams, Alabama. I could go on and on. So there's a lot of good players coming out. Defensive line help, offensive line in the 2027 draft. Are those two teams positioning themselves because Miami, they just made a trade. They got rid of Waddle, their receiver, 27 years old. And the Denver Broncos say, sure, we'll take him. You got Jalen Waddle, fourth rounder, and Waddle, but they gave him away for they got 2026 first rounder back, third rounder, and a fourth rounder. So it seems to me that Sullivan, the GM, and for Miami, and Malgi, the GM for the Jets, they're setting up for that 2027 draft.
Well, I would hope that they aren't taking for the Dolphins because then why did you give Malik Willis that contract? Like,
Right.
I hope they ain't tanking. I think what Sullivan's doing, I think he's trying to do the what they do in the NBA, which is if you're not having a good team, like you tear down approach and you try to recoup as much draft capital you can, back. Would I do that with Jalen Waddle? Probably not. Would I probably do that for a Devin Chain? Maybe. I probably would. But it depends on the draft class, right? This year's draft class at wide receiver is apparently good. So maybe Miami feels like we get as much as we can for Waddle. He's 27. He's eventually going. I think he's 27. I believe
Yeah.
he's going to. He's not. He's almost at that 30-year-old threshold there. So how many good years does he have left, and can we get that value? Maybe use that first round pick, to get another wide receiver on that cheap deal. But if you're a Dolphins fan or a Jets fan, this is not going to be a fun season at all. You just hope what's going to make the season salvageable to watch is going to be the young guys, right? Whoever they pick as a rookie, can you see those development? Can you see that growth? Because I compare it to the NBA, right? Like when NBA teams are tanking, when they're in the basement, not doing anything, they're not doing anything. You wanna see growth, right? You wanna see, okay, like the rookie's playing and he's getting better. Like, okay, there's actually a future here. You don't want it to be 2014, 2015 Philadelphia 76ers trust the process where there's a bunch of dudes coming in and out the door, and the NFL equivalent would be calling up this guy from the practice squad, getting rid of him, bring this guy from practice squad, getting rid of him, bring him back in. Like you don't want to see that. You do want to see growth. I think from Miami, you still got chain there, so hopefully that helps. Whoever you draft, you want to see them take those steps. You want to see if Malik Willis can be that guy for you. The Jets, it's a very weird situation because Gino is probably going to come out there with a chip on his shoulder with how everything played out with the Raiders. But what what's the ceiling for that team? 5, 6 wins? Like they got pieces on defense, older pieces, but they got pieces. So it's going to be a very weird division in AFC East. But if you're the Bills and the Patriots, you're pretty happy about this because you got at least guaranteed 2 wins on the schedule, possibly.
Yeah, I was talking with Nate about that. He's a Bills guy, and I said, well, they're playing Miami and the Jets. They probably 4 wins there to get that team forward now. And then speaking, the Jets, they're going to have the second overall pick. Miami is in the 11th spot. Yeah, well, they're in the 11th spot, which they traded to Denver. So um, we'll see. We'll see. How it works out for both sides. I tend to like what the Broncos are doing when you get your take on that.
Hmm.
Now, yeah, you have Sutton. Sutton had 74 receptions last year, 10-17 yardage, 7 TDs. You have Franklin there. You have Mims. If Bo Nix was healthy, now that he is, do you think they go right back to the Super Bowl conversation?
It's definitely possible. I think adding a guy like Jaden Waddle, who was the number one partly for last season, but knows how to be a very good number two. I think he's the perfect complement to Cortland Sutton. He's a better complement than people saying AJ Brown, Cortland Sutton. That was not going to work at all. I think he's the perfect complement with his speed to kind of help open up things for Cortland Sutton. I think now having him as your wide receiver too, now you move Troy Franklin into your number three slot, which is pretty good because now defenses have to really consider. Okay, we got the speed of Waddle, we got the speed of Troy Franklin in the slot. Imagine if you got Marvin Mims on the field too. Like Denver now has a very good wide receiving core that can do a lot of different things with the pieces, that they have. You like you said, healthy Bo Nix. You still got that running game. I think you brought back essentially all your running backs that you had last year. So you're pretty good there. I think the key is going to be for Denver. Can that defense do what it did last year? Like that defense played at like a 22 Philadelphia Eagles like type pace in terms of their sack numbers. I think what they had 68, 65, 68 sacks
Yeah, led the
last year.
NFL.
Yeah, like can you get that type of production again? And we saw with the Eagles the following year that didn't happen. They didn't sack numbers did not come nowhere near that. And I think that's for the Broncos. Can you get back to those numbers? Because if you can, your offense is outstanding. Like Bo Nix, like there's no reason there's no reason why Bo Nix should not be in the MVP conversation with those weapons.
Yeah, but yeah, Bo Nix. I think in terms of George Payton, their GM, he's done a nice job setting them up
Hmm.
for the future, and they got the quarterback, so that's always the thing.
Yep.
You get your quarterback, you build around 'em, like we were talking about earlier. They have Vance Joseph coming back as a DC, which is huge for Sean Payton, the head coach there. So I think they'll be in a mix. We'll see if the Raiders, they made a lot of free agency moves. The Chiefs, we talked about earlier, and can the Chargers get over the hump in this division? So I think the AFC West is going to be very competitive, and this is just setting Denver up. Another move I wanted to get your take on. He's a former guy coming from the AFC West. The Philadelphia Eagles signed Hollywood Brown to a 1 year deal. Is this a 1 year Howie Roseman prove it type situation, or could he be a building block for the Eagles? And obviously, this is going to set up my next question: what's going to happen with AJ Brown and the Eagles?
First I love the addition of Hollywood Brown. I remember I was texting a friend of mine when I saw that the Eagles were interested in Darnell Mooney, but they didn't give him because the Giants gave Mooney, I think, that 1 year $10 million deal. And I said to him, I was like, Hollywood Brown or Nick Westbrook Akina age, or it should be the next wide receivers on the Eagles, list, just because the Eagles out that slot position, they need a guy they need a wide receiver that can stretch the field and help open up the field even more, for Smith, for Brown. They haven't had that since Quez Watkins, and Quez had, his drop issues, but you can never discount that speed element. And Hollywood brings that speed element. I mean, I'm already thinking about, what Sean Mannion can do with Hollywood Brown, with AJ, which I think he'll still be here. I still believe AJ will be here. Like the idea of being able to move all three of those guys around within the offense. Imagine having Hollywood and Devontae both on the outside with AJ Brown in the slot. What are you going to do? Like you have to literally pick your poison of, do we worry about Hollywood going over the top and Devontae maybe going across the field, but we got to worry about AJ because now AJ's matched up against our slot guy and he's bigger than our slot guy, right? So you have that element. You have the element of, will we see, Mannion use Hollywood Brown in the way that the Packers use Jaden Reed with the jet sweeps and things like that to get that speed, element in that elusiveness, onto the field. I mean, I think Hollywood's the best wide receiver three that Jalen Hurts has had in his era. I mean, he's better than Jahan Dotson, and I wish that the Dotson experiment worked, but it just didn't. But I think having Hollywood, I think if he does well, I think I could definitely see Howie Rosen bring him back. I think his contract is pretty cheap. I think the base salary, I think it's only like 1 to 3 million or something like that. I think it's like in between that, so it's really not a super expensive deal. And everything we've seen at Hollywood Brown has said so far, it seems like he's excited to play with Jalen Hurts. He just missed them at Oklahoma. He didn't get the chance to play with him at Oklahoma, but he did. I forgot. I think it was on Speakeasy. He did say that Jalen Hurts is, one of the best, one of the better, deep ball throwers in the league, and we know Hurts can put the ball, on the money. So I'm very excited to see what Hollywood does, and I hope that it is with AJ Brown because like I said, you add those three to the mix. The field's just looking different. Defenses have to pick their poison, and if you're the Eagles with AJ Brown, I would not move off of my asking price. The Once I saw Jalen Waddle go for a first, third, and a fourth, that kind of set the market too. I'm not giving up. I'm asking for everything. I'm asking for that or a first and a second round pick because Jalen Waddle isn't even in the same stratosphere as the AJ Brown. So if Jalen Waddle's getting you a first, third, and a fourth, AJ Brown can at least get you a first and a second and a fourth or something along those lines. If a team is that desperate. Now that doesn't work in the Eagles' favor because there aren't that many teams desperate for a wide receiver.
Yeah,
Unless you're the
yeah,
Baltimore Ravens.
yeah. And you know, it takes two to tango. That's what I always say to
Yep.
everybody. And I was on Richard's show. He was asking me, "What do you think?" And I just think Howie Roseman's just not going to come off of that
Mm-mm.
value. And why should he? You know what I mean? Don't
No.
don't help somebody else out. You know, you talk about the
Exactly.
Ravens. How and number one, I don't think the Ravens could afford him. With this Trey
No.
Hendrickson situation and everything, and the other team has got to have the cap space. And then they
Hmm.
got to have the targets. A fan was emailing, texting me saying, "Oh well, send him to the Rams. The Rams look like a good spot for him." I was like, "That'll blow right up because
Exactly.
Puka's going to get 120 targets, and then what's going to happen with AJ Brown?" So, you know,
Exactly.
in looking at how the Eagles have split it up, it's amazing. AJ Brown 78 receptions, 121 targets, 1,003 yards, 7 touchdowns. Devontae Smith 77 receptions, 113 targets, 1,008 yards, 4 touchdowns. I mean, their numbers are extremely similar, and it helps having 1A and 1B. Somebody you
Hmm.
can split targets with, and teams can't focus all their attention on. And I think that helped Cooper Kupp rejuvenate his career with Seattle. Everybody's focusing on JSN, and that gave him ability to get open. So you got to have two receivers in NFL today.
Yeah, you do. It makes your quarterback's life easier, and I think we've seen that with the Eagles, right? We saw what the Jalen Hurts era was when it was just Jalen Rager and Devontae Smith. It
Oh,
was it was
Jalen
okay.
Rager.
It was, and Quez Watkins was your number three there in that situation.
Yeah, everybody wasn't saying Howie was a genius then. You know what I mean?
No,
He's
no,
still
no.
trying to live down that Jalen Rieger instead of Jefferson situation.
And CD, because then CD was that same draft too.
Probably
So
could have got him too. Yes.
yeah, so how he learned his lessons about not taking Big 12 wide receivers in the first round.
Yeah, and we're talking with Javon Alford here on Lloyd Vance Insider Football on 1029 The Game Coast Sports Digital Network. Thanks for being with us, everybody. As we said at the top, the NFL never sleeps. Always something to talk about. A lot of big storylines still coming down. Uh, Javon, the Eagles. Speaking of Trader Howie, I think this is a good situation because I was a little down on this guy. The Eagles send safety Sidney Brown. Uh, in a fourth rounder and a sixth rounder to Atlanta. So they moved up in the fourth and sixth round. So now they're 114 in the fourth round and 197 in the sixth round. So I think it's a situation where Harry Roseman's talking to one of his former guys, Ian Cunningham, who's now the GM with the Falcons.
Mhm.
Uh, do you think it's a good landing spot for Sidney Brown, and where do you see these two teams going?
Yeah, certainly. I think for Sidney Brown, it's a fresh start, for him. I think, with the Eagles, he didn't move up the pecking order of, getting starting, snaps, and it was clear even when he got on the field, he wasn't necessarily always in the right position. It was like almost like watching Crash Bandicoot, the video game. If you're watching like Crash Bandicoot play football, like that's what it was with like Sidney Brown. Like he's athletic, like, but he just doesn't make the right play a lot of times. But he's a good special teamer. He's like Keely Ringo. Keely Ringo's athletic, but you don't want Keely Ringo playing defensive snaps. You want him on special teams because he's a gunner. So I think for Brown, I think this is a good spot for him to get a fresh start on the Falcons defense that has some young talent on there. Jalen Walker, Billy Bowman, Xavier Watts, AJ Terrell. Like that secondary has some pieces, and he won't have to step in and beat a guy, which is a good thing. He won't have to beat a guy, and maybe they can kind of help him get on the right track, on that Atlanta defense. And then for the Eagles, I think for them, it's okay. Now, how do you feel this, safety position next to Makuba? Because you don't have Reed Blankenship no more. You did resign Epps, and Epps was very solid last year when he did come back from injury. JT Gray is more of a core special teamer than a guy that you want, playing. But he replaces Sidney Brown essentially on special teams because of how good of a core special teamer he is. So I think for the Eagles, now the goal is, and it's kind of telegraphed now, that you likely will have to take a safety within the first 2 rounds to kind of solidify that spot. And that's not necessarily a bad thing, right? Because like you said earlier, Lloyd, you build your team through the draft with young talent. You can't always spend the big bucks at a luxury position. Like there are some safeties out there, right? The Kyle Duggars of the world are still out there. But if you're Howie, would you want to take a veteran guy or would you want to go get the younger player that you can help develop and mold? Because you are developing a young defense in the secondary. Cooper DeJean, Reek Woolen, Quinton Mitchell, Andrew Makuba. Why not get another young safety to kind of have your own version of the Lito Shepard, Sheldon Brown, Michael Lewis type situation that you had, eons ago.
Yeah, and it's going to be interesting. I agree that at pick number 23, maybe he wanted the top safeties for all of them because safeties a
Hmm.
lot of times teams are not taking them with that high of a draft pick. So maybe one of them slides down 23. Obviously, the safety everybody wants is Caleb Downs from Iowa State. I mean, he's a
Yeah.
playmaker, but I just don't think he'll be there at 23. But probably a second rated guys, the third rated guys, they'll probably be there when the Eagles pick. And the Eagles, they'll probably wait until I think, their MO. They'll probably go offensive line, defensive line in the
Hmm.
first round, maybe the second round, third round. Then they start looking for that safety. Hopefully it's not another Macho Harris season. I still remember covering Macho Harris. He was supposed to replace Brian Dawkins, and he just never
No,
kind of got it done.
no, no. Oh my God, Macho Hero. Oh my God.
Jamal's like, no, no, no. So yeah, but we'll see. And in terms of filling holes, and I wanted to get Javon's take on this before we get out of here. Is you talked a little bit earlier, Javon, about the free agents that are left still out there, and some of the GMs they're still trying to fill. Every team's got 90 players they're going to take to mini camp and after the draft. Into training camp, and there's still some veterans out there. I wanted to see what Javon thought about them landing somewhere. Joey Bosa, a guy who Nate wasn't too happy with the Bills. He always seemed to be injured a lot. He's 31. Does he
Hmm.
end up with the Niners playing with his brother? Where do you see Joey Bosa kind of landing? And will it be right away or after training camp in the regular season?
Niners would be the optimal fit just because Bryce Huff is no longer there after he retired, and they need another defensive end to kind of pair. Obviously the brothers, and you have Mike Hill Williams and Alfred Collins as well there. So I do like that there for him. I thought the Bears would be an interesting spot too for Bosa too, but their cap situation is not the best right now. So I thought that would have been a good landing spot to give Montez Sweat another option, opposite of him.
And we were just talking about this guy, not the best flag player, but maybe he showed he had some gas left in the tank for the New England Patriots last year. Receiver Stephon Diggs, he's 32 years old, 85 catches last year, 10, 13 yardage wise, 4 touchdowns. Is he going to find a spot, or what's going on with him? Some of these teams going to wait on some of these young receivers in the draft.
Yeah, I see Diggs in more of a wait and see moment. I think just because I think you also have like Debo Samuel still sitting in the free agent market too. So I think that's going to be a wait and see. Let's see how the draft pans out. Early May type situation, closer to mandatory mini camp. He finds a location on a 1 year deal.
Yeah, and this guy has popped up a lot in Eagles talk. The Eagles did sign Dallas Goedert to a 1 year contract, but David Njoku from the Browns, he seems like he's finally going to be free for them. But where does he land? He's 30 years old. Last year he did have 4 touchdowns in a limited offense. I think he could help a team. And the Eagles, when you look at their tight end position, other than Goddard, I think they did re-sign Calcaterra, but I think there could be room for Njoku.
Yeah, no, if you're an Eagles fan, I would love to have David Njoku. A David Njoku, Dallas Goddard 1-2 would be amazing. It'd be much better than Grant Calcaterra at your number two. Stone Smart might beat Grant Calcaterra out for his spot. So you never know. So I do like that Njoku. Njoku, Baltimore maybe could be another option for him. Green Bay could be another option, I think, for him too, just because Tucker Craft is coming off an injury and Luke Musgrave wasn't really the best last year when he got the chance. So I think wherever he goes, he'll probably be that tight end too, which is not the worst thing in the world because if you have him as your tight end too and he's healthy, that just makes your quarterback's life like 10 times easier.
All right, and then we'll go to You called them the AARP receivers. We'll get our take on these guys. Tariq Hill, he's 32. He's coming off all those. He had 3 injuries to his knee, and then D Hop, he's 33. He's talking about maybe Kyler gives him a call and he goes to the Vikings for one last cup of coffee. I mean, do we see these older receivers getting a shot? And we'll throw Keenan Allen in there too.
I think all those three guys will probably wait until the summertime to get their shot. Hill, especially because of the injury. Hopkins, maybe it's because, like you said, Kyler does him a solid, or the Bengals, because he said something about Joe Burrow. He would love to play with Joe Burrow. So I think it'll be one of those situations for all those guys. Like June comes around and there's a team that needs a veteran guy for wide receiver 3, wide receiver 4, and they get picked up on a small 1 year deal to see what they have left in the tank.
Yeah, and Odell, who was running around the flag field the other day, he's like, I can still do it. I was like, Odell, give it up, man. So, but we'll see. Another great week here on Lloyd Vance Insider Football on 1029 The Game, Coast Sports Digital Network. I really appreciate Javon Alford jumping on. Always does a great job, and we'll have him on again as we prepare for the draft. We're still mocking out here, and teams are getting in position for April 23rd in Pittsburgh. But appreciate Javon, appreciate Angel behind the glass. Javon, anything else before we get out of here?
No, just again, appreciate you for having me on, talking some football. Even though it's the NFL offseason, there's always something happening. Maybe we'll talk about the UFL the next time I'm on. Talk about some spring football.
All right, we look forward to it. I know Angel is, and we will talk to you down the road here on Lloyd Vance's Insider Football on 1029 The Game, Coast Sports Digital Network.